Hello, everybody. We are back. UFC Nashville main card predictions. We're here to break that down for you. We're joined by Son, Luke, Ryan, the full crew. But before we get into it, we got a little bit of fight news to break down. With the first being, President Trump has announced that the UFC will be going to the White House July 4th of 2026. Ryan, I guess I'll let you start this one off. Do you find any validity in that statement that the UFC will be going to the White House?
I think it was just well, now I do somewhat, right? So you have like a couple of factors that weigh in now, or this could potentially happen. It seemed like when Trump was speaking in Iowa or wherever he was kind of just going like, America this, America that. It's 250th birthday next year. We're gonna do something crazy. He's like a light bulb popped in his head. He kind of probably just like, fuck it, White House card, like card at the White House. Then he kind of goes into it. And he's like, we're gonna put a K. Fuck it, Dana will do all that. He's like one of a kind. He can put it together, and you kind of brush it off. It was one of those things. It's like Trump's just saying something, and then it goes. You see like Conor McGregor tweet like that AI photo of him and Michael Chandler going like, "We're all great disputes are settled." The White House, him in the front lawn, and then John Jones tweets, "Ooh, a fight at the White House." And if there's anything that's going to pull anyone out of retirement, even a guy like John Jones, it's going to be the opportunity to fight on like the 4th of July at the White House. You know what I mean? Like it would be probably the most historical, greatest card of all time. So I think when you see the excitement of potentially getting superstars like John Jones and McGregor back, even fighting on the same card somehow, I think there would be significant interest in the UFC's part to actually work through logistics and try to put something like that together. So, I'm 50-50 split. Will it happen? Maybe. You got a year to put it together.
Dude, fuck McGregor and Jones coming back. Alex Smith, the GOAT. I saw a clip of him today. Apparently he said he's coming back at heavyweight. So, the greatest fighter on paper ever would be coming back. But that'd be a sick card. I think I don't have many hopes that it'll happen at all. I think it's a huge security risk. I think you won't be able to have a crowd out there. It'll be tough to build anything up, especially after, they already, shot at Trump once, right before his presidency. I think there's just a lot of hazards in general that will not allow it to happen. But it'd be cool if they had it out on the streets or something. At least anywhere near the White House, I can see that happening. Now, on the front lawn of the actual White House, no, I think there's too many, security risks to that ever happening. But it definitely would be a once in a lifetime opportunity. That'd probably be one of the cooler things we've ever seen in the sport.
Yes, Son, I agree with everything you just said. I think it's a huge security risk, so I think that will be the biggest deterrent away from it. But just in terms of like great events that the UFC puts on for numbers, like 300, 200, it'd be cool to get an event next year that we don't have to wait, 80 some odd pay-per-view events until we get a stacked card. So that for me is the biggest thing to look forward to. Right now, obviously all speculation, but Trump did say it, and then Dana, kind of corroborated it. So, something to look forward to. Who knows?
I will say too, like I put anything political aside, when Donald Trump puts his mind to something, I don't doubt that he's going to get it done. So if he is set on doing it there, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And another thing to keep in mind as far as security risk go, like, yeah, it's 1,000% a big security risk, and how you're letting people on the premises of the White House. I don't really know how that all work out. You have a lot of time to hash that out, but like I was at the NCAA wrestling finals this year, which Donald Trump attended, and even the security risks there were pretty crazy. You had Secret Service everywhere. Like when I went to go in, I got patted down. They checked every single pocket in my wallet. And I was like, well, what could I possibly, like have in this little pocket? I don't know. But the security risks there were pretty fucking high. And I know Donald Trump goes to like a lot of UFC pay-per-views in which the security risks there are also very fucking high. So I think with the Secret Service, like they would be able to staff it well enough to make it happen, but just the logistics of it, because he said like 20,000 people. I don't know how you're building a stadium in the front lawn of the White House in that time. Like, how the hell does that work? How do you get the seating? I don't know. That makes no sense to me. But kind of stemming off of that a little bit, Johnny Bones Jones has announced he is back in the portal. He posted today him walking into a gym. Seems like he's training. I don't know, Luke. What do you think about this? Do you think Johnny Bones Jones is back, or are you just not going to take what he's doing seriously?
Yeah, obviously we've been circling this dilemma for a year or so now. I'm not going to put anything into what he says or what he tweets out right now until I actually see, a fight signed up. He said he's back in the pool. I don't know if that's like confirmed by anyone or it's just his words. For me, I'm moving on. I'm looking forward to seeing who Tom Aspinall fights next. And that's where my head is at in the heavyweight division. John Jones, it would be great to see him back. It would be great to see him headline that fight card if it does happen at the White House. But yeah, not putting any stake in the game right now.
Let me step in here for 1 second, because a big problem is if they were to have this event, there is no one to headline it. There is not one American champ there to headline it. And on the 4th of July, you'd need to have an American champ headlining it. I guess my next question would be, and I'll direct this one towards you, Sam. If John Jones is serious about coming back, is it a bad move to book him against Tom Aspinall, the man from England, on the 4th of July? Because if he loses, dude, that would be fucking terrible.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much like worst possible case, like if that happens. I think gaining independence from England and then the champion, headliner being the one that ends up winning it would be kind of fucked up.
In the heavyweight division too.
Yeah, I mean, other than that, honestly, I really don't. I don't think they'll make that happen. It's just too big of a risk that it does happen because I was honestly teetering on who was going to win that fight in the first place. I think if you do bring John Jones back, you put him up against Pavlovich. I mean, that's a guy he hasn't fought yet, and it's kind of like a U.S. Russia thing. It's kind of just like a historical, country nation battle. We have, the Rocky movies, obviously, there's the big Russian that, Rocky ends up having to take down. So, getting back into real fights, I think that'd be what you'd want to make if John Jones does come back. I mean, he's an older guy. They're both older guys, and it's definitely a decent legacy fight. Not as good as a Tom Aspinall fight for John Jones, but I do think it's a decent legacy fight for John Jones to kind of step away from.
I don't know, man. I think ego and vanity will push John Jones to fight Tom Aspinall. You know what I mean? Like holding up the UFC heavyweight championship belt on the front lawns of the White House with Donald Trump, coming over there to shake your hand and give you a pat on the back. It's also the only fight I feel like for John Jones's legacy that makes sense, coming back to fight Sergey Pavlovich off a 2-fight loss streak, assuming he doesn't fight again until the 4th of July, even though the whole Russia versus USA is obviously huge. It does nothing for him in terms of that, besides the ability to be able to fight at the White House. And at this point, I think the only thing fans would want to see if John Jones returns now at this point in his career, after just announcing retirement, after the whole shit he did in Albuquerque with the woman, drunk driving, and ducking Tom for about a year. If Tom wants to fight 4 times, the only matchup Tom Aspinall is going to want is John Jones if he actually is serious about coming back, and they're going to have to give it to him. I mean, that's the biggest fight you can make right now outside of something to do with Topuria and Islam, or Topuria moving up to welterweight to try to get 3 straps. So I think it has to be Tom in this case, or whoever's holding the. Since Tom loses his belt, it'll be John Jones for the heavyweight strap.
And you know what this thing with Jones is too? It's that his show pay is so fucking high that they almost can't book him in a non-title fight because he just gets paid way too much. Where if he's not sitting there in a title fight, the event might not be profitable for the UFC. So that's kind of where I think that hinge comes in. I think that's what comes in with a lot of these higher level fighters, not even higher level, but who have been in the UFC for a while that have big names. Is it's hard to book them constantly, even if they want to fight, just because they get paid so much that it's okay, this needs to make sense for both parties. So it could be a situation like that as well.
And I'll assume that John Jones has a similar contract to where McGregor's is where even though he's not holding the championship belt, he still gets a part of the pay-per-view split, just because he draws in so many numbers. So I think, and if that's not the case, then I'm sure John will want to be fighting for a belt just because he knows the pay-per-views on that would be absolutely massive. It probably would outsell McGregor and Khabib.
Especially if at the White House too. If it is held at the White House and just how much that adds, because they'd stack up that card a ridiculous amount too. I think it probably would too.
You think about 4th of July, especially if they hold it on the 4th of July, 250th 4th of July, it would be sold in every single bar across the United States. There would be nowhere you could go where that isn't playing on TV.
And it'd be a ton of Americans buying the card as well. It's not like in Russia where they just illegally stream everything. So like the pay-per-views aren't there. Like you'd have people legitimately buying that pay-per-view. So yeah, I don't disagree at all. But moving on, we've had a couple fights announced since the last time we met. Biggest one of them might being a featherweight bout between Gene Silva and Diego Lopes, which is an absolute banger. Salin, I'll let you take the floor from here and give your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the prediction yet. I don't want to get, jump the gun too much. There's a lot to see still. Obviously, Diego had a very, tough fight against Volkanovski. Gene Silva's been on a tear, so I still have to definitely look into this fight more and kind of, let the fight week develop a little bit before I give my take on it. But I do know that it's going to be an absolute war. I mean, it's going to get messy in there. It's definitely going to get bloody. I can see these guys just throwing absolute hands. Gene Silva's going to get crafty as he always does. Diego Lopes, is going to put the pressure on him as he always does. So I'm very excited to see it. I think that guarantees a Brazilian fighter to win in the UFC this year, unless they somehow draw, which is like, the fabled UFC draw, which hardly ever happens. But yeah, I'm very excited. I think that fight's going to be sick. I think those are like, obviously, you have the whole fighting nerds guys, but those are two of the most exciting Brazilians coming out. And coming in the UFC and obviously making their runs as it is. So very excited for the country. I want to see, obviously going to be tuning in very heavily into that fight. I do want Diego to win. Not that I have anything against Gene Silva. I think Gene Silva's sick. But Diego is obviously up there with one of my favorite fighters, and I've been watching him since his debut. So I'm definitely hoping he can, relinquish that chance to get the belt back again. Or get the belt in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, Son, definitely not a lot to add here. I think you hit all the points. It's going to be a banger. One of the biggest fights I'm looking forward to that's been announced as of late. Yeah, not going to get into a prediction right now. My biggest thing is like how much did Diego Lopes learn from that fight with Volk? I mean, we know that Volk has probably, if not one of the highest fighting IQs in the last 10 years that we've seen. He's so smart. And I feel like it goes one of two ways when you fight for the belt and lose as the contender. You either learn a bunch from the experience or you kind of go on a downhill slope, kind of like Steve Erceg we're kind of seeing right now. So I just hope it's a great fight. Do we know if it's 5 rounds or is it 3?
I think it's
not
5.
that it matters.
It's supposed to main event.
Okay, yeah, not that it matters. I don't think it goes the distance. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be fight of the night. You might as well pay those guys now.
Yeah, Luke, I like what you touched on about Diego Lopes, where it's one of those cases where you either see a guy learn a lot or he goes on a downhill skid from here, which is like one of the reasons why I kind of didn't like this matchup when it was first announced, just because I don't necessarily think you need to pace Gene Silva. He's a very high caliber fighter, very exciting fighter. I think I would have just liked to have seen Diego Lopes fight Yair Rodriguez in Mexico on that UFC Noche card, just because, they have that historical beat between their camps, their teams. They were going at it all week during his championship fight with Volkanovski. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of media material you could use to build up that fight. And in the meantime, it's like not like maybe caution, try to build up Gene Silva, but you could give him someone just as high caliber, maybe like a Lerone Murphy, a guy like that who's also climbing his way into the ranks, and we could still see, is Gene Silva this high caliber of a fighter? And if he beats a Lerone Murphy, then yeah, immediately throw him in with someone who's like number 1, number 2 contender, and then have him fight for the belt. Because I think at this point, it's looking more and more like Yair Rodriguez is going to get a title shot that he doesn't deserve. So that's just my take. To be honest,
I don't even know if Yair is getting it right now. Like I was listening to Volk today, and he just had a podcast come out with Mighty Mouse, and he didn't seem like he was under the impression that anyone in particular obviously is slated in for it yet, which, I mean, I know he wouldn't be able to announce anything if he were to be able to, but he seemed to almost be leaning towards it might be the winner of Mosvar versus Aaron Pico, which I wouldn't mind at all, because I really don't want to see Yair Rodriguez in another title shot. I think it's very undeserving there, like you were touching on there, Ryan. But circling back to Gene Silva versus Diego Lopes, in my opinion, I think this is a very bad matchup for Diego Lopes. And reason being is Diego Lopes likes to move forward with reckless abandon. Against Alexander Volkanovski, you could see Volk is literally gearing up to throw a heavy overhand right. And Diego Lopes is like, I'm fine with eating this, and I'm going to just chuck an uppercut right back at him. And he does that in basically all of his fights. So that's just one instance, but that's something he does. He's fine with getting hit. He has a great chin. But I don't know if you want to test that against a guy like Gene Silva, who has that kind of power and that kind of precision, who can just put you out like that. I don't think that's the kind of guy you can play that game with. I think Diego Lopes will hold the advantage in the grappling department. Don't get me wrong. I think Gene Silva's grappling defense can hold up very well as well. And I can see Gene Silva finding a finish in this fight and just propelling him even further. So I agree. I don't like this matchup. I would have rather have seen Diego Lopes versus Yair and have seen Gene Silva with a chance to kind of build up against another guy, because it's weird. You have two guys that fans really love that are both like going to be in that championship echelon of fighters for the next 5 or so years, and they're fighting each other, which is weird. But yeah, I really do not like the matchup for Diego Lopes personally. And moving on, another featherweight bout was announced between Brian Ortega and Aljamain Sterling for the UFC Shanghai card at the end of August. Another super fun matchup. Ryan, I want to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I'm just hearing about it now. I like it. So, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I like it. It's a good fight for both these guys, both coming off losses, in this division. One, Aljamain Sterling to Movsar Evloev, who I believe should be fighting for the belt next, but that's besides the point. And then Brian Ortega, who just lost to Diego Lopes. Very similar style matchups, both really offensive, grappling, wrestling heavy guys. I'll be curious to see. That's going to be I equate that to another Movsar Evloev, Aljamain Sterling fight where it's just very high level scrambling, grappling positions, Granby rolls. You're going to see the full 9 yards or full, whatever when it comes to the ground game there. You're not going to submit Ortega. I don't think Ortega is going to submit Sterling. I think this is going to be one of those ones where it gets to the judges' scorecards and you're just going to be sitting there like, damn, someone's going to feel like they got robbed at the end of this. Who that is right now, I have no idea, but that's how I'm going for it.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is one of those fights that their grappling kind of cancels out. We see that a few times when we get two grapplers together. They're both pretty high level. So I feel like those are two guys that, obviously Aljo had, kind of tried to go with the striking against, Sean O'Malley. But those are two guys that I feel like I haven't really seen, throw hands in a very long time, really just stand there and bang. So that's what I'm really hoping for. See if they, kind of just respect each other's grappling and just want to give a show to the fans. And that's what I'm hoping. I think at the end of it, Aljo, to me, is the one that kind of has the edge here in most departments. Obviously, their grappling is going to be, super well matched, but I think just the athleticism, and maybe, I honestly can't tell you how good Brian Ortega's striking is, because he's usually in that clinch or, on the ground. But yeah, I think Aljo probably ends up with the edge here, and I think that's who I'd go with. But I am hoping for a stand-and fight here.
Yeah, son, I'm with you. I think looking obviously way far out, I would go Aljo here too. I just feel, I don't know, I feel like his transition up a weight class has done wonders for him. I feel like other than the Mosbar fight, he's looked great, and he looked great in that fight against a guy who's, one of the top grapplers in the division. I think really just like the slight edge in offensive wrestling that Aljo has over Ortega might play a big part in this. Obviously, we'll revisit it when it gets closer, but looking way far out, I'm going to go Aljo. And I agree. I think for the most part, it probably cancels out grappling wise. And we do see a stand and bang, which I kind of feel that Aljo might have a little bit of an advantage. I feel like we really haven't seen anything from Ortega that you could give him the edge in striking.
Yeah, I agree. I favor Aljo in this one early, and it's kind of goes back to one of those things where it's like wrestler versus jiu-jitsu and control versus not defensive grappling, because Ortega's offensive in all positions of grappling, but Aljo just poses that threat of controlling you and holding you there for a long time. The way he's able to backpack people, sit there, and whatnot. And I can see him controlling Ortega for a lot of the fight. And it's a 3-round fight because the main event there is like Zhang Mingyang versus Johnny Walker, which is just setting up the Chinese fighter for a nice knockout in front of the home country. But yeah, I see Aljo being able to control Ortega, and we haven't seen Ortega really strike much since 2020. I mean, I know he had that fight with Diego Lopes where he just got hit, more so than anything. Then you look back and you had that fight with Yair where Yair rocked him early, and then that fight got all weird. Ortega found that submission round 3, and then before that, he got hurt against Yair. So it's been a long time, really, since I don't know how good Brian Ortega is right now. It's kind of what I'm getting at. And I do know how good Aljamain Sterling is. He's shown it way more recently, and he's shown that he's still on that high level. So I agree. I also favor Ortega there. But moving on to the last bit of fight news, a middleweight bout has also been announced a little bit ago. We have Caio Borralho versus Nassourdine Imavov. Another fun fight that is a title eliminator at middleweight. The winner of that is getting the next title shot after DDP versus Hamzat. I think that's about guaranteed there. So, Luke, the floor is yours. Let's hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, definitely still far out, but I'm going to lean Kyle here. I just think that he has all the momentum in the world. I think the Fighting Nerds have all the momentum in the world, even with the protest loss recently. I don't see anyone other than Shavkat, Kamzat, or DDP being Kyle right now. I feel like he's kind of evolving to a new level. So I don't see him losing this one. I'm going to take him for early prediction. Obviously, things may change as we get closer to fight week. We see weigh-ins, face-offs, and all that whole deal. But yeah, I got Kyle.
Yeah, Luke, I think I'll tend to lean and agree with you there. I feel like, both guys very high level, can mix it up great, both in the striking and the wrestling department, very evenly matched. But I think what you touched on with the Fighting Nerds is they just game plan so well for their opponents. And I think Caio Borralho is the type of fighter that does tend to stick to a game plan, even if he's getting cut up, if he gets a cut, if he gets rocked a little bit, he'll still stick to whatever, to his game plan, listen to his corner. And I think that's what it's going to come down to in this one. So I'll lean Kyle here as well.
Yeah, it's very tough to deny how great Imavov has been. I mean, that Izzy fight was really, surprising. I definitely took Izzy in that fight. And his performances have just been getting better and better. But I do think that the Fighting Nerds all got collectively as a team got better after that college protest fight. Because obviously any given fighter that's stepping in that cage, they have, a team of 15 guys. However many guys it actually is in the background, but it feels like, there's a gang of guys behind them, doing all this research, doing all this stuff, instead of the fighter, so Caio can actually focus on the training, and then he can get all the pointers and tips and game plan, from all these guys working in the background. So I think that in general, not only did it make the fighters better, but it made that team better. I definitely brought that team closer together. I can see, these guys being a lot more meticulous and more careful as the competition gets better and as these guys start taking bigger ranked fights. So I don't expect Fighting Nerds Corner to lose this one. We are going to see a lot of interesting exchanges. Whether it does end up, I'm hoping it stays in striking. So obviously those are the most exciting battles. But I can see a few takedowns being there. So I'm kind of excited to see what both these guys can do. Obviously very high level. These guys are in crazy shape. And two really exciting guys right now, and I'm definitely going to lean Caio here, though. I think that Fighting Nerd team just got a lot better after that Carlos fight.
Yeah, I'm leaning Caio as well. And one thing I want to point out, you guys pretty much touched on all the points I wanted to make, but one other thing to point out here is for anyone that wants to play MMA math and be like, well, look at Imavov. He KO'd Cannonier where Caio went the distance. If you guys watch that fight, Jared Cannonier was up on Nassourdine Imavov going into the 4th round when Imavov went and found that finish. Controversial stop, although I think he probably would have found the finish anyways, and if not, maybe could have had a 10-8 round there, which would have swayed in his favor. Then you have round 5 with him with all the momentum. But he was down in that fight when that finish was found. Then you move on to that fight with Brennan Allen. It was a competitive fight, 29-28 across all the scorecards. Then you move on to the fight with Israel Adesanya, where no doubt Nassourdine Imavov deserved that win 1,000%. But that first round, Izzy looked great. Izzy tried to brush off that nut kick and then just got fucking whacked with that overhand right, I believe, which finished him. So I'm not completely sold on Nassourdine Imavov being title contender, not title contender, but title holder level, where I'm more sold on Caio Borralho being there right now. He just seems like he's on that level where I'm not completely sold on Imavov just yet. So for that reason, I also lean Caio Borralho. But now, moving on to this Nashville card, we'll kick it off on the main card. We have a light heavyweight bout. Junior Tafa is moving down from the heavyweight division to fight Tokkos. Interesting bout here. San, I'll let you just take the floor from here and give your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, definitely weird. I mean, always a weird thing when, somebody that used to be fighting in another, kind of moves up and down on the weight classes. The Tafa brothers in general have had kind of a tough time in the UFC, very spotty records on both of them. And I don't know, I honestly, like, it's kind of a tough one to tell because obviously he's moving into a new weight class. So you never know how somebody's going to, react being down there. Maybe he gains the speed that he was needing in heavyweight. Maybe he loses the power that he needed to win in heavyweight. So you never really know how those are gonna end up. There's not really a good way to tell. I mean, nobody could have told the success that Max Holloway would have had moving up. Obviously he's a great fighter, but you just can't tell what's gonna happen. So I guess for that reason, I'm gonna err on the side of caution. And I do think Tokkos, I mean, he's a fucking beast. This dude's pretty chiseled. He's pretty ripped up. He's had, in my opinion, like a better recent record. And he's been performing well. He's got a few finishes in the last few fights. Obviously taking some losses here and there. Both guys kind of have a spotty record. But I just see more from Tokkos. And I think this dude's, I think he's just more, physically prepared to fight a guy that's coming down and maybe feeling a little bit weaker in that ring or in that octagon. So I'm going Tokkos here.
Yes, on. I think you brought up a lot of good points. I definitely think this, for me, was the hardest one to decide on the main card for this fight night. I just really want to like the Tafa brothers. I feel like I throw a bunch of money on them consistently, and I tend to lose that money. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But at the same time, Junior's 7 years younger. Obviously, you mentioned it moving down a weight class. Hopefully, I feel like it's a common theme with the Tafa brothers. They tend to gas out. So hopefully, that weight cut getting down adds a little more stamina to his game. And I think this is very clear that if this goes to the ground, like you said, Tuco is going to win this. He normally has success. I think he's a way better grappler. Tafa normally always have trouble on the ground. But I do think the Junior Tafa has a striking advantage here. So I'm going to take Tafa. I just think that if they could keep it standing, I think his striking is a little crisper, and I think he does hold that power coming down from heavyweight. A lot of what ifs in this fight, but I'm going to go Tafa here. I think he's a slight favorite. I don't know if that'll stay that way, but I'm going to take Tafa.
Yeah, I like the points both of y'all touched on. For me, it comes down to looking at who Tokkos has fought in his first two fights in the UFC. One being Umar Sy, who just lost to Alonzo Menefield, but was 10-0, or is 9-0 when he fought Tokkos and moved up to 10-0 after he beat him. And then Navajo Sterling, who's another rising prospect from New Zealand, who's now 7-0, 6-0 after that. But the thing about that fight was Tokkos was really going heavy for the grappling aspect because he knew he'd get outstruck on the feet, and he really tried to mix it up. And I just think I credit more of the Navajo Sterling takedown defense as opposed to the Junior Tafa, ability to shuck people off the cage, move back and center out to the circle of the, into the center of the octagon to, to get to the fight where he needs it to be to win. So that being said, I think it's going to be should be a pretty boring one, but I have Tukos just, grinding his way out to a decision, just using grappling, push him against the cage, get him to the ground. That being said, Hassan, you touched on this as well. You never know how the power is going to translate. This is very well one of those fights where Junior Tafa could go out, and revamp his entire career. I know Tafa's coming in as a slight favorite, but the price, and Tafa's last performances really don't do it for me. And if they did, obviously he'd be a much larger favorite than he is right now. So I think I'm going to take the underdog on this one.
I will say one thing, and I'll say it to you, Luke. Usually when it's us two versus the other two, we don't fare the best. I've noticed that.
I don't fare well against anyone, dude.
But in this one, it is going to be us two versus the other two. And what it kind of came down to for me is Junior Tafa is he's a better volume striker. He throws more. He just throws more in general than Tokkos. He's more accurate than Tokkos, and Tokkos gets hit more than Junior Tafa. I usually side on the side of grappling, but I don't know how well Tokkos' wrestling is really going to translate here. Because I don't think his wrestling has really been phenomenal thus far in his UFC career. I know, like you touched on, Ryan, he was matched up against Omar Sy and then Navajo Sterling, who are two very tough matchups. And it kind of makes you not really know how good Tuco really is, because it's like, all right, you're thrown in there with two tough guys. Outside of that, you fought just regional scene fighters and whatnot. So I don't know what's completely there. And I think Junior Tafa coming down from heavyweight, he should be the bigger fighter. If he's not, that's just pretty wild. He should be stronger in the octagon, feel stronger. And I think just the strength aspect of it should really hold a big aspect as far as the grappling goes. Granted, I kind of have to sit down and watch the film a little bit more on Tuco Tokkos and see where his wrestling initiates. Is it in the clinch? Is it taking shots from the outside? How does Junior Tafa defend against those? That's something I need to dive in deeper on. But as of right now, my pick is Junior Tafa due to the volume, and I think he can fend off the wrestling of Tuco Tokkos. And moving on to the heavyweight division, we have a little bit of a reverse. We have Vitor Petrino moving up from the light heavyweight division to the heavyweight division, taking on Austin Lane. Vitor Petrino is a massive favorite, and I will say him as a massive favorite has not fared too well. Both of his last two fights, he's been a massive favorite and lost both of those. So I don't hold the most confidence in Vitor Petrino in general. I also don't hold the most confidence in Austin Lane. So with that being said, Luke, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this one and where your mind's leaning.
Yeah, I think kind of my whole topic on this card is really, siding maybe with the younger guys. 10 years younger is Petrino here against Austin Lane. Obviously, this is a move up. I think it's a good move up at this age. You still have a lot of time, and the lower rankings, the bottom 10 to 15 of the heavyweight, it's kind of always up for grabs. So I think this is definitely the right time for him to move up. Clearly, he's faltered in his last two fights as heavy favorites, but he did fight Dustin Jacoby, who seems to catch a guy that's ranked higher than him, every other fight, and our knight in shining armor, Anthony Smith, I thought he was winning that fight up until he got caught. I thought it was a good fight. Obviously, the experience of the veteranship came into play there. But I think this is like good by the UFC to take a guy who, kind of has faltered. He's moving up, and now he's fighting a guy in Austin Lane who's, on Tapology, I think he's the 66th ranked heavyweight in the world. Definitely not someone that is expected to win this fight. And Austin Lane is super chinny for a guy who's, going up a weight class, probably putting on a ton of muscle, and already hits hard. He's fighting a guy has 6 losses in his professional career, all 6 by knockout. So I think this is just UFC playing matchmaker here. I'm going Petrino. I think he gets it done in the distance, most likely knockout for me.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say, now that I realize it, I was calling him Alex Smith earlier when I was talking about the White House instead of Anthony Smith. So that's on me. But not to embarrass myself, our 1 million fans. I'll be quick on this one. Not much to say. I think Vitor Petrino. I think he keeps he's a very lean guy. Even at light heavyweight. So I think he's going to be able to, grow a lot of muscle rather than just put on, fat and get a little bit slower. Lane's super chinny. He's been getting knocked out here and there. He's also 37. Petrino's 10 years younger than him. He's 27. And I don't know. I think it's just going to come down to him, being quicker, being able to find that shot and probably get that knockout before that bell hits.
Nope. Y'all two pretty much touched on both those points. I like how you brought up the Dustin Jacoby loss, Luke, because I thought Vitor Petrino was winning that fight as well, and then he just stepped in a little too much, put his chin down, and got caught with like a left. And that's just the case sometimes. Some guy just hits you right on your button and you go to sleep. But for that fight, he was winning it. And I figured I liked a lot. He looked improved from when he fought Anthony Smith. He was more hesitant, not shooting as much of a sloppy takedown, which got him caught in that guillotine, that he had to tap to. So I mean, the move up to heavyweight's interesting. I get it. You're on a 2-fight skid at light heavyweight, losing to what most people in MMA, in that division view as lesser opponents that you should be beating if you want to get into that top 15. But if you could string up, if you look at the state of the heavyweight division, if you can get 1 or 2 wins by knockout or sub, you're ranked. You know what I mean? So I think this is a smart move up in weight. Competition's definitely not there as much as it is at light heavyweight. So yeah, give me Vitor Petrino by knockout.
Yeah, I'll make it a sweep here for Vitor Petrino, and I'm kind of pissed off saying it because after his last fight against Dustin Jacoby, which I just needed him to win to cash whatever parlay I had, and he lost, I said right then, I will never pick this guy again. And then he gets matched up here with Austin Lane, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm just eating my own words here, and I will side with Vitor Petrino. I guess my concern with him comes – it's like the fight IQ and also just the output, because even that fight he had with Dustin Jacoby, where I do think he was winning it, just the output wasn't there. And in the third round, that fight was kind of hanging around where it's like, all right, if anyone has a big moment, they could win it. And he got himself caught and knocked out. And I think it's Anthony Smith when he got subbed and like got up and started laughing. I was like, all right, dude, like, fuck you a little bit, but take that away. He should be the quicker fighter. He should have more volume. He's a much better striker. I don't see Austin Lane wrestle fucking him here. This is a spot that he's put in to win this fight, and I think he will win this fight. So, yeah, I'm going to side with Vitor Petrino as well. And moving on, we have a featherweight bout between Nate Landwehr and Morgan Charrier. Sorry, I definitely botched that name right there. I should have done a little bit more research on my pronunciations, but regardless, I know Landwehr's coming off a loss, but he's a fun fighter to watch. I'm a fan of Nate Landwehr. His style of fighting is fun. He fights for finishes, and I enjoy watching him. But outside of that, Son, I'll kick it over to you to give your input on this one.
Yeah, just off the bat, I think I was going to go with Charrier, or however the fuck you say this guy's name. But then I realized he's French, so I'm going Nate the Train here, hopefully by knockout. Like you said, I mean, he's a super exciting guy. He came from Russia, I think. He came from a Russian promotion before the UFC. He was just fighting like crazy ass motherfuckers out there. But this Morgan guy's been pretty, spotty. He's dropped some losses to some, guys that you would expect a good prospect to win. And I think Nate Detrain's solid. He's got all the experience you need. He's super confident. I think, he's in Nashville. He's down kind of in his element type of deal. I think he's from Louisiana, if I'm not wrong. So, just being down south, he's kind of in his in his zone. And yeah, I think he's going to be able to take this one. I know I mentioned, age to the fight before, that being a big difference. There's a pretty big, age difference here again. But I do trust Nate the Train. This dude, stays in great shape. He's a really exciting fighter. And anytime he steps out there, I'm hoping he wins. I'm pretty sure I'd bet on him like every single time because he's usually plus money. So I'm hoping he wins this one. I think, I just want as many, Nate the Train fights as I can in the UFC. I think he's an exciting dude, and I think he's kind of, I'm hoping he gets on that mic and says some crazy, redneck shit.
Yeah, son, I agree with everything you said. It's tough. This one's tough because I just like you said, I feel like every time Nate fights, I bet on him. And I don't know if where he's from, but he does fight out of Tennessee, Clarksville, Tennessee. And this fight is obviously in Tennessee. So that hometown advantage definitely plays a huge factor, and especially with a guy like Nate. I am going to bet on Morgan here. I just think this, like I said, this is kind of my topic of these cards, just picking the younger guy. I think Charrier has a little bit more speed. I think he's a little bit more of a technical fighter. And yeah, he's lost some bad ones, like he lost to Nathaniel Wood, but Nathaniel Wood's much more of a technician than Nate Landwehr is. I think the biggest thing for me is if Charrier hits him up in the first and Nate's wobbled, I feel like that almost guarantees Nate's going to win the fight. So that's what scares me. But I'm definitely siding with the age here. I'm going to go Charrier. But either way, I think this fight wins fight of the night, and I definitely think it goes to decision. I think it's going to be a complete war.
Yeah, I like both the points you all touched on. For me, it came down to I looked at Morgan Charrier. He's definitely, like you said, the more technical fighter. Better fighter. But dude, Nate's just in Tennessee, fighting in America. He's gonna say some crazy shit on the mic. And I think sometimes the best way to beat a fighter who's more technical than you is to fight the way Nate does, is where you just bum rush him, get in his face, and make it a dog fight. Make him uncomfortable. And I think every time Nate lands, he could poke him on the cheek, and the crowd's gonna scream. You know what I mean? I think Nate's gonna be fired up for this entire fucking fight. All 3 rounds, and he's just gonna bring it to him. Full violence, the whole 9 yards. and give me Nate. I don't see him losing in America to a Frenchman. Just put it that way. I don't think.
Yeah, man.
I don't think he can allow it. So.
Yeah, man, and dude, and Nate Landwehr, he fucking brawls. Like you were touching on Ryan, he's a brawler, and the way he fights, he brawls. And you're going against a guy who doesn't have the most UFC experience, who's dropped a couple of UFC fights. And it's like, okay, now you're sitting here in a legitimate fight in this guy's home country. You have the full crowd behind him. Not even his home country, but sitting there in his like home state. Right there, it's going to be packed. Like you touched on, Ryan, I think the crowd could play a bit of a factor in the judges' scoring as well. We've seen that before. And I just don't know how Morgan Charrier will react to being in that full-on brawl with Nate Landwehr, the seasoned veteran who throws at a higher output than him. And with that being said, I'm going with the dog here. I'm going with Nate Landwehr. And moving on, we have a featherweight bout between Calvin Kattar and Steve Garcia. This one is essentially a toss-up, with Calvin Kattar being the very slight underdog. And it's an interesting matchup here because both guys have serious power. Both guys can put people out. Both guys love to strike. And this is a fight that I'm also very excited about. This could also be another fight of the night type candidate. And yeah, so Ryan, I'll kick this one over to you to give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm going Calvin here, and pretty much the reason for me is, while Steve Garcia is a rising prospect, I just look at some of the guys, obviously undefeated in the UFC, but it's just like who he's fought. He fought Chase Hooper at lightweight or at featherweight before he moved up to lightweight, and Seungwoo Choi, Kyle Nelson, Miguel Costa, or Ezekiel Costa, and then you look at who Calvin Kattar has fought. Obviously he's on a 4-fight skid, but the level of competition for me just says it. Josh Emmett, split decision. You got KO by Arnold Allen, Aljamain Sterling off of a long layoff, and then Yusuf Zalal, Yusuf Zalal didn't really want to fight in that fight. I don't know if you saw, he just kind of ran around the cage when Calvin was standing in the center of the octagon, trying to get it back. So for me, it just comes down to experience, and it comes down to, I don't see Calvin Kattar losing 5 in a row and getting cut from the promotion potentially. This is obviously Steve Garcia's, biggest step up in competition. And I guess it makes sense. You see the guy who's still ranked, on a 4-fight loss streak. But I think Calvin Kattar's still got that dog in him. So give me Calvin Kattar, especially at those odds. A little parlay booster at plus 105.
Yeah, this one honestly is one of the toughest fights to call. I think honestly the main card, the main event is pretty fucking tough too. And this one, I don't know. I think just this is a big momentum fight for me, right? Because Calvin Kattar's had a shit ton of losses. I mean, I don't know, fuck, he won. I mean, he beat Giga Chikadze before that, and after that, he's been on, losing streaks. The last time he won before that was 2020 against Jeremy Stevens and Dan Ige. Which, it's just super tough to say because I love Calvin Kattar. I mean, I remember him, putting on shows back in the day and him just being a great fighter. But he's 37 now, which is very tough. Like, you see very few fighters perform at a high level at that age. And Garcia is fucking legit, dude. He's been on a very nice run. He's been getting finishes left and right. And he's just a little bit younger to where I think his speed held up and his power held up. I think that Yusuf Zalal fight with Calvin Kattar was really tough to watch, kind of in my eyes. It was kind of weird because it was like, seeing a show horse kind of, stop, running as fast, seeing one of your, one of the guys you kind of grew up watching and one of the guys who was always around the UFC get a little bit slower, have a little bit less power. With that said, he's always got those elbows. He's a very, very dangerous fighter. There's always, it's very tough to call him out of this. And honestly, until this podcast started, I was really riding with Kattar. But then I kind of had to face the facts. And Steve Garcia is on a tear right now, and he's been doing really well. And Calvin Kattar's kind of on that downslope a little bit, maybe a lot of it. The Giga Chikadze win is kind of not as, as exciting and as, big of a name as it should be. And he's dropped a shit ton of fights after that. So I kind of forced to go Steve Garcia here. Hoping that he lets off Kattar easy here, but I can definitely see a finish coming his way.
Yeah, son, I think you make all good points in defense of Steve Garcia. He's a beast. He's on a run, very technical striker. it's going to be an entertaining fight. But I'm going to side with Kattar here. I just think when you obviously the level of opponents is so much different. I actually saw a chart this week, kind of on a tangent here, but it was like Calvin Kattar's arc in like volume and output. Then he fought Max Holloway, and it's like a clear decline after. Like that damage in that fight was insane, and I think that definitely altered the trajectory of his career. They should have called that fight in maybe end of the third, in the fourth round for sure. But yeah, like Ryan, like you said, I think people don't give him enough credit. He took Josh Emmett, who at this point seems to be the only guy who could withstand Ilia Topuria. He took him to a split decision. Then he lost to Arnold Allen, but he popped his knee, so they called that a KO. But his knee was gone. The Sterling fight, we just talked about Sterling on a hot streak, and then Zalal, we kind of talked about. It wasn't a good fight for Kattar, but I think this is a little bit of a step down in competition for him. Obviously, he is the older gentleman, but I think the fact that Steve Garcia is going to stand and bang with him, and I think that opens up a huge ability for the counter strikes from Kattar, which we've seen him do, obviously, in his former self before the Max Holloway fight, do at the highest level, that we've seen in the division. So I just don't see him losing 5 in a row. I think he is a guy who has kind of been in the top of the heap for a while, kind of faltered, but he's still right around the ranking. I don't know if he's ranked, but right around there. And I just don't see him losing 5 in a row and getting cut. I got him to win here. I think the over-under in rounds is 1.5, and I think these guys are so tough. I don't think that under hits at all, so I'm going to be slamming that over. So that's going to be my little prop of the day. But yeah, the over and Calvin Kattar here.
Love the prop.
I'm going to be honest. I like Kattar as well, and I really like that point you made, Luke, talking about Steve Garcia's kind of style of fighting and how aggressive he is, because Calvin Kattar, in my opinion, is the better boxer, pure boxing skill set in this fight. Like, if they were sitting there in a fight that was guaranteed to go to the distance, per se, and it was a boxing fight, I think Calvin Kattar would outpoint Steve Garcia in boxing. I think Steve Garcia's power poses a big problem, especially to someone who's 37 years old. But Calvin Kattar has been durable throughout his whole entire career. And I know durability is one of those things where it's like, okay, you're durable until you're not durable and you eat that shot. But Calvin Kattar has kind of proven the point of time there where he has been very durable throughout his whole career. His power is still there. And I think technically he is a better boxer than Steve Garcia. So if this fight were to go the distance, I like Calvin Kattar to win it there. And I could see Calvin Kattar also finding a finish. With that being said, when someone holds the power that Steve Garcia does, I could see him finding a finish as well. But I think that finish could go both ways, and I like Kattar's potential ability to win in the decision. So I kind of think there's more routes to victory there, and therefore I'm siding with Calvin Kattar. Also, shout out New England Cartel, teammates of Connor Matthews. So that's another thing. Doesn't impact my opinion here, but pretty cool. And moving on to a welterweight bout, we have the return of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson taking on Gabriel Bonfim. Bonfim's about a 4-1 favorite here for obvious stylistic reasons. He poses that big grappling threat. He poses that submission threat that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has been susceptible to. But on the flip side of that coin, for as long as they're on the feet, I can see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson outstriking and really frustrating Gabriel Bonfim. And with that being said, San, I'll let you take the floor from here and give your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I had a pretty tough time picking this one. Like, honestly, most of the fights on this card. Of course, the odds are really stacked against Gabriel Bonfim's side. But, seeing him get knocked out by Nicholas Dalby is a very tough sight. Because, I just wouldn't even rank him in the same world as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. But on the same other side of that, he's fighting a 42-year-old Wonderboy, which I hate to say, but that's not really your prime ages for fighting. Thompson's been losing, obviously, to the best, in the welterweight division. I really don't think Stephen Thompson could have been given better, competition in the past few years. You got Joaquin Buckley, you got Shavkat, you got Kevin Holland. Well, that might, that one doesn't really count, but you got Bilal and Gilbert Burns. So, just absolute guys that are just absolutely the top of the division, really, really peak. And I can definitely see him kind of just circling around Gabriel Bonfim and, just making him frustrated, and just letting him, not have his way with him. But I think that kind of puts him in a defensive fight where a guy like Gabriel Bonfim is going to, aggressively go for those takedowns and really trying to put himself in that position. So for that reason, I can't really give it to Stephen Thompson being that much older and kind of playing a little bit of a defensive game is how I see it going on in my mind. Because you can only run away so far in a caged octagon. So I'm going to go Bonfim here. I'm really hoping it's like an easy submission that Stephen Thompson can just tap from and like walk away fine. I could see this being a retirement fight for him. I hate to see it, but he's really old. For a fighter, obviously he's a very young man still, but 42 is not fighting age. So I'm hoping he can just walk off with this one unscathed, unhurt. But I do see Bonfim probably getting a sub here.
Yes, on really not too much more to add. I think Zach, you hit on some points too. This is a classic problem that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has had in his career. Rather, if he's 42 or 32, he's always had problems with grapplers. And Bonfim is a specialist. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu specialist. He's a big sub guy. And I know you guys talked about the Dalby knockout, but if you remember that fight, Bonfim gassed out. It wasn't like he got caught. He was gassed at that point. And I think he learned a lot from that fight, winning his next two. Only one loss in the professional record. Obviously, you can never count Wonderboy out. He's a fan favorite. I don't know who you are. If you don't like Wonderboy, you have to be a loser. He's one of the nicest guys in the UFC. Everyone says it. And when it's standing, he always has a striker's chance. Son, but like you said, 15-year difference in age. I mean, other than Chase Hooper versus Jim Miller, I don't know if there's been a bigger age discrepancy in the UFC. I think you hit on all the points how the fight's going to go. Wonderboy's definitely going to have to be defensive in terms of takedowns. And I think Bonfim has all the ability and efficient enough striking to not compete, but withhold his own and not get knocked out and find that takedown and, find his way to a submission, probably by rear naked choke here. So I'm going Bonfim by sub as well.
Yeah, it's probably the smart play. I kind of just want I want to have like a happy I want to feel like happy on Saturday. So I'm just gonna go with like Wonderboy Thompson by knockout, and then he takes the gloves off and he retires and he hugs his wife and kids, in the octagon, and gives like a cool retirement speech of DC, talking to him, and then like the crowd sings the national anthem as he's walking out of the cage for one last time, and he's like hugging his wife and kids. So we're just gonna make believe that that's gonna happen, and that's where we go. But what you guys touched on is, it's like you said, all of you. Granted, he's only been sub once, and it was the Shavkat. It's hard to see, if Gabriel Bonfim will actually find that submission, because while he has something getting taken down, just controlled on the ground, he does fight the hands well. It doesn't really, has a hard time getting back up once he's down there, but does fight the hands, stays out of trouble in that regard, but when it comes down to the judges, it doesn't look great for you. And we've seen that. But if he can circle out, circle to the side of the cage, play his distance well and just make it like a karate point style type of fight and just frustrate Bonfim, he very well could nod this one up on the judges' scorecards. There is a path to victory. It just does get hard when you factor in everything, between the 15-year age difference, his wheels have already slowed down. We've seen it. To his credit, Kevin Holland, that was a great fight, but you remember they also agreed to not go to the ground before that fight. And Kevin Holland took him down by accident and then immediately let him right back up, Then they shook hands and they went back at it. But to that point, Joaquin Buckley fight, he looked great in that. I think he was up 2 rounds on 2 judges' scorecards. Very good before he just got caught. I don't think Bonfim's the type of fighter that's just going to catch you the way Joaquin Buckley does, where he just says, fuck it, like I'm putting this in, circling the cage, just super athletic, not that type of fighter. For me, I want to be happy on Saturday. I'm going Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I don't care how he gets it done. Lotto play, we're going to go Stephen Wonderboy Thompson by submission, 2nd round.
What the?
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
He's going to holy shit.
Granby roll, get the back, rear naked choke.
If that happens,
did I hear that right? Or fucking
the career just has to end.
Drinks?
The career just have to end right there, man. But
The whiskey's hitting Ryan.
I wanted to say, first off, I'm a big fan of upstate karate and what Stephen Thompson and his dad do there, and even more so after talking to Weston Wilson, who will be there in the corner of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on Saturday night. And after having him on the pod and talking to him and hearing about how hard they're working, and granted, they're professionals, they're working hard, but it's always cool to hear that insight and whatnot. So full-heartedly, I think all of us are rooting for Wonderboy, and I think Wonderboy will win this fight. Will be winning this fight up until he gets taken down, and then we'll be like, fuck, here it is. And just giving Gabriel Bonfim's wrestling and jiu-jitsu and finishing abilities on the ground, I think once he gets Stephen Wonderboy Thompson on the ground, it's only a matter of time until he finds that finish. But if Wonderboy is able to keep it up on the feet, I see him outstriking Gabriel Bonfim. I see Bonfim getting very frustrated, having never dealt with a striker like Wonderboy. It's a very unique, unorthodox style that he poses that I don't think anyone's used to fighting. And if that style can give Bonfim troubles and he's able to control the distance very well, I think Wonderboy could pose some serious problems for Gabriel Bonfim here. And I don't think Gabriel Bonfim by any means has really kind of solidified himself as an upper echelon or high level type fighter. He's still obviously that rising prospect. So fighting that vet like Wonderboy with that interesting striking style will definitely pose some problems. But I do think Bonfim will be able to eventually get him down to the ground and unfortunately find that submission. But we'll 100% be rooting for Wonderboy come Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be tossing some money on Wonderboy. Sorry to cut you off, but
sure.
I don't care what it is. I mean, that's too good odds for too good of a fighter.
And at plus 320, dude, it's like, I don't think it's that unrealistic that he can outpoint and win this fight. I've seen like worse lines of guys winning fights where it's like Wonderboy at plus 320.
Strickland, bro.
Like,
Strickland Adesanya. Those are the most ridiculous odds ever.
So I don't know, man. Like, I do think Wonderboy could be a live dog here in a sense, but I think you'll know like 4 minutes into the fight how it's going to go, 3 minutes into it, and maybe you can find a live opportunity there. Maybe if Wonderboy wins round 1, but Bonfim has some success grappling into round 1, I might live bet Bonfim if the odds are near even. I probably won't because fuck betting against Wonderboy at that point, but you could maybe find an opportunity to live it with those odds. But moving on to the main event of the evening, we have Derrick the Black Beast Lewis taking on the undefeated prospect in Tallison Teixeira. Sorry, botched that. One too many whiskeys. But this is another very interesting matchup here. You have the power that is Derrick Lewis. Obviously, Teixeira poses his own power as well. Likely not going a decision. If it were to, I would be absolutely shocked. But Derrick Lewis is pretty notorious for putting down some of these rising prospects when he has been a sizable underdog. Another opportunity to do so here. Luke, do you think Derrick Lewis can get the job done?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Derrick Lewis is a fan favorite in the UFC. Obviously, hilarious on the mic, hilarious with the Ronda Rousey. Where's she at? Did you ask about me? The whole shindig. But at the end of the day, I think we could all agree that he hasn't been his best self as of recent. And, you know, they do say power is the last thing to go with age, and he still definitely possesses that power. He definitely could still crack, but he is 40 years old. We just talked about this in the Wonderboy with Bonfim fight, 15-year age difference between these two. And yeah, it's hard to say. Teixeira's undefeated, only one fight in the UFC. He fought Justin Tafa, knocked him out, got him out there clean and quick. I think the Derrick Lewis window for a win is like with under the 1.5 rounds here. I think that's when he starts to get tired and his power starts to slip. And I think Teixeira is just he's got like this Brazilian Muay Thai style that he's good enough and fast enough and still possesses that power to avoid getting knocked out. Derrick Lewis is always a live guy. He always could finish the fight at any point in the fight. But I think Teixeira, I think he's just a little bit too good. He's also got 4-inch reach advantage. He's 4 inches taller. He's a big dude. This isn't like a smaller guy that Derrick Lewis is going against. And I just think his technicality striking is going to show here. It sucks to say because I'm a huge fan of Derrick Lewis and I don't want to see him stop fighting. I definitely don't want to see him stop winning. But I'm going to Teixeira here. I think he gets it done by knockout.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. I really want Derrick Lewis to win this fight. This is kind of another like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Maybe I'll make a grandpa parlay and put those two together just for the hopes. But it's tough, man. I mean, you get fight game isn't really something you can do forever. It's not exactly a daytime job. It's definitely something you're risking your life out there every time you're out there. And I mean, at some point, you kind of just start slowing down, or you're not really the same, black beast that you were back in the day. So it's tough to, confidently pick Derrick Lewis. And I think a big thing, which you touched on, Luke, very well said too. I think the height and reach advantage is what's going to allow Tallison Teixeira to tire out Derrick Lewis a little bit, maybe run around a little bit in the first round, if he wants to do that. I can't see these guys just banging. And at that point, I think the reach is just what it's going to be. It's a lot harder to find, that overhand that you've been seeing your whole life as a taller guy hit you, especially with a guy like Derrick Lewis, who's probably slowing down a lot at this age. So I think, if Tallison wants to be smart, he can circle around him, he can tire him out, and then look for that, heavy-handed hit to knock him out. But even if they do engage, as long as he can keep his distance pretty well, I can see him getting another first round finish here. Definitely a crazy amount of power from both of these guys, and this Tallison kid is pretty legit. I think we called his debut fight, and I was on him. I don't know who we were kind of split, but I was definitely on him. He had a really good coming into the UFC. Praying for Derrick Lewis. I hope he wins, but official pick, I have to go to Teixeira.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, I've touched on it a few times between Cunha Blades and then Shamil Gaziev versus Jairzinho Rosenstrike. I know it's like this weird thing, specifically within the heavyweight division, where it's like they try to push up these guys after one win in the UFC, to go fight, or in Cunha's case, no wins, but they push these guys up to try to get them to the like top 10 ranking, caliber competition immediately after one win. But in this case, there's just so much going against Derrick Lewis in this, in terms of height, reach, age, and then it comes down to technicality. I feel as though when Derrick Lewis fights guys who equally match him in power, such as not Overeem, Pavlovich, Ngannou, Tai Tuivasa, when he gets drawn in, those are the fights he loses. And then it's on the other side of that, it's just heavy grapplers. And I mean, Tallison Teixeira has the technicality and he has the power to match that within the striking. And I really think that given age, being 40 years old, Tallison Teixeira being 25, Derrick, he'll be able to control this fight. And it's not going to the ground. And I don't think we're going to see another like Rodrigo Nascimento moment, or I forget who he flying kneed within the first, 10 seconds of his fight. Rodrigo de Lima. Unless Derrick Lewis, in my opinion, does something along those lines where it's just runs out, doesn't touch gloves, immediately sprints and tries to hit a flying knee or some bullshit, as he called it. He's not. It's going to end with him probably on the canvas. So I'll take Tallison Teixeira by knockout. Maybe it goes over a round and a half, but within 2 rounds. It's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a clean sweep here and go Tallison Teixeira by knockout, and I'd probably put that out as a prop play on our page as well. And a big reason being is Derrick Lewis, when you watch him fight and when he finds his shots, it's a lot of sitting here. He likes to be patient. He likes guys kind of dancing around, and he waits for that big shot to kind of present itself, and he throws that big right. And Tallison Teixeira fights in your face. He fights going forward and he pressures. And Derrick Lewis does not fight well against pressure fighters. It's been a pretty big kryptonite of his throughout his career when he's unable to sit there, find a shot, kind of think a little bit. He's not a great counter striker. He doesn't really perform the best. And I see Tallison Teixeira getting in his face. I see him pressuring him. He has the longer reach. So you can pressure while still maintaining the distance and not put yourself in too much danger. I mean, when you're fighting Derrick Lewis, you're always in danger. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he holds the knockout record for a reason here. But he can fight smart while still holding that pressure and being in Derrick Lewis's face, not let him think, not let him sit there and find that big shot. And I see Tallison Teixeira doing that. And Derrick Lewis also has been finished by knockout over a handful of times in his career. And I see Tallison Teixeira doing the same and putting out Derrick Lewis, honestly, likely round 1, maybe round 2. But I don't know. Derrick Lewis isn't really a guy that you see get knocked out too early in fights, to be completely honest. I can't really Pavlovich knocked him out early, but outside of that, I can't really recall many. And Yeah, but regardless, I see Tallison Teixeira finding the knockout and likely probably within the first 2 rounds. But before we call it here, I have one question for you guys. I was arguing on Instagram a little bit with someone, just a little fun, keep myself entertained. And the argument boiled down to what fight would draw the bigger numbers right now? Ilia Topuria versus Conor McGregor, complete hypothetical, wouldn't happen. Or Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. And Ryan, I'll let you start this one off. In your opinion, what fight does bigger numbers right now, Makhachev or McGregor for Topuria?
I would have to say McGregor. I know he's been out of the fight game, but he's one of the only, if maybe the only fighter I know of in the UFC that turned himself outside of the UFC into a household name. You know, if I go up and ask my parents, you know, I really have never sat down and watched a full UFC card in their lives, you know, don't follow sports or whatever, like, oh, what do you think about like McGregor? They'll give me an answer. If I were to go, who's Islam, like Islam Makhachev, they'd be like, who the fuck is that? You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just, in terms of that, it's just more people know who McGregor is, and he's still always going to be the higher sell. And you have all these people that have been waiting, 3-4+ years now for him to come back at this point. You know, like that's been so anticipated. Even now, after 4 years, when he teases it every now and then, you know, he was supposed to fight last year against Michael Chandler, pulled out within a couple weeks or whatever due to like a foot injury. That would have been the biggest card of the year last year. International Fight Week, it would have outdone UFC 300 pay-per-views had that fight actually taken place. So for me, I still think McGregor's the bigger draw here, and he always will be up until the time he's 45 and like actually, you know, is like, or not 45, but like 40, and we just know he's never coming back. But he still teases it. He still gets a ton of engagement. He's still the most followed UFC fighter of all time. He's sitting at like 45 million, and then Khabib's like 30 something, and then you have like John Jones with like 12. So I still think in this regard, it's McGregor would be the higher draw in the pay-per-view sell if he were to fight Topuria tomorrow.
Yeah, I think probably raw numbers wise, just because of his international fame, it's kind of just like getting like, you know, Michael Jackson to do a show somewhere, you know, the whole world's gonna watch. I think just maybe raw numbers wise, probably the McGregor Ilya fight would do more numbers just because of McGregor. However, I will say if you're like a real fight fan and you like want to watch, you know, a really good fight and a fight that's actually going to be, you know, important and, you know, going to last, you know, going to be a legacy fight for both guys. You're really looking at that Ilya and
100%.
Islam fight. I think it's just like it doesn't make sense. You know, obviously McGregor's, you know, kind of embarrassing end of his career, you know, for really how great he was and how famous he got. He kind of crashed out pretty fucking bad. And I think Ilya and Islam are both super respectable guys that have, you know, a shit ton on the line right now. I think it's a more important fight if you're a UFC guy, if you're a UFC fan, if you're somebody that, you know, actually knows the sport. I think it's definitely the more important fight. Now, if we're talking raw pay-per-view, probably, you know, the McGregor fight, I think anything McGregor does is probably going to, you know, win in that aspect. But I think as far as, you know, if there's, you know, the UFC gods looking down at us, I think it's definitely a very clear answer that, you know, the Ilya and Islam fight is, you know, probably the fight to make. And probably like the most, you know, obviously everybody wants to see and like skill wise, like who is the fucking best fight out there. And I think
It'd be the
probably
highest
one of
level
the
fight.
best in history.
It'd probably be the highest level fight in mixed martial arts history, right?
That's what I was getting at is I think it might be like one of the best like actual fights ever. Like up there for sure. I mean, we've had some fucking crazy wars in the UFC. Like, don't get me wrong, but like I think like skill wise, the way the game's developed, the way the fighters have evolved, what both of these fighters have accomplished. They're both in their absolute prime right now. They're both doing crazy shit to crazy fighters. So yeah, I would love to see one of them have their way with the other guy, or you know what, go the distance and see what they can show us. You know, see how good these guys really fucking are.
Yeah, son, I think you hit on it, or I agree. Pure numbers, Conor McGregor is going to do more numbers, and probably he could be 80 years old and fight Khabib at 80 years old, and he'll probably do the most numbers. I remember going to house parties in high school with people I know don't watch UFC now. I know didn't watch UFC then, but they spent 60 or $70, whatever it was at the time, on Conor McGregor pay-per-views for people to watch. But then you got to factor in like the percentage chance. I think there is a 0% chance that that fight ever happens. Not that maybe McGregor comes back. He's not fighting Ilia Topuria. He's fighting Michael Chandler. He's fighting maybe Max again, someone like that. I think there's a very definitely going to be growing, but there's a very high chance that we get that Ilia Islam fight at some point in the future. I don't know at what weight class. I don't know when, but I think, Son, like you said, pure UFC fandom. There isn't a person who tunes into the UFC, even just on pay-per-views, that isn't tuning into that fight. They're skipping weddings for that. They're not skipping weddings, but they're having the phone at the back of the seat for that kind of fight if a wedding were to ever go that late. But yeah, that's the fight to make. I mean, you look up and down the roster, John Jones included or not, that is the fight to make. That is the biggest draw. Ilya, I know you said Instagram followers, Ryan. I think he gained like 5 million Instagram followers after beating Charles or some shit like that. Obviously, crazy. He's from Spain, so they tend to go to their superstars very heavily. Cristiano Ronaldo, guys like that, they get a lot of followers. But Islam's just as big as Khabib is in Russia, that side of the world. That's a huge fight to make. Yeah, I want to see that fight. I mean, that's a fight that, as a fan, wakes you up in the morning.
I was gonna say, I think you touched on it because, like, at this point, I could honestly, like, after seeing what Ilya did to Charles, is like I could kind of care less about Islam moving up to welterweight at this point. Yeah. I would rather him just come straight back down and take the lightweight strap again, see if he can at least, and then move up, because that fight interests me more than any other fight that I think the UFC could possibly book, like you said, at this point. Like, I don't care about the Jack. Like, I was very excited for the Jack Della Maddalena fight, and then Ilya went out and KO'd Charles in a round, and I'm just like, dude, like, Islam needs to come down immediately and be Ilya's next title defense. I was like, there's no one in the lightweight division that he could fight that would interest me outside of that. I know they're teasing Justin Gaethje for MSG, but it's just like, what's going to happen here? The only guy that has the high, that, at this point might even have like a higher caliber skill level to beat Ilya, at least give him the best test we've seen so far, is Islam. It's definitely not Justin Gaethje. It's not Max Holloway, who's now a lightweight. It's not, besides maybe Arman Sarukian, it's not Paddy Pimblett. He's not tested enough. Dariush, no.
It's Mauricio Rufy. Mauricio Rufy is the only guy in the lightweight division.
The truth.
Give me a second here. Give me 1 second here. Mauricio Rufy is the only current fighter in the lightweight division that I can see beating Ilia Topuria. Reason being is, I think, all right, obviously Ilia Topuria has fought in a lot of taller fighters, a lot of bigger fighters, and he's proven that he can still knock out those guys that are taller, that hold the reach advantage. Understood. The way in which Mauricio Rufy fights is a lot different than these other guys. His striking's a different level. The way he throws his kicks is much different than all these other guys. The way he can throw the kick to the head, how nonchalant he makes it look, how quickly he can snap that up. He can fight in pretty much any stance. He's able to control distance very well. And in a pure striking bout, I could see Mauricio Rufy potentially landing some sort of head kick that can cause Ilia Topuria big troubles. With that being said, I'm not saying I think Mauricio Rufy beats Ilia. I think he's the biggest threat in that division right now. I think everyone else, Ilia takes their head off in a couple rounds. Maybe Arman Sarukian can pose a threat. Maybe the grappling could play heavy. Maybe if he grapples them early, that power kind of goes away as far as Topuria goes. But I think Mauricio Rufy is probably the biggest threat in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can disagree just because, we haven't seen Rufy fight anyone ranked yet. I know there's guys that he would probably start ranked. Benil Dariush and Adam Moicano, these are guys that, I think Rufy would probably have his way with. But when I look at like Topuria's trajectory, like his like projected career at this point forward, it's he'll fight Justin Gaethje, he'll knock out Justin Gaethje, most likely he'll knock out Justin Gaethje. Islam, and if Islam beats JDM, the stars are aligned. I don't think Islam will come down to 155. I think he'll vacate his belt again at lightweight, and he'll move up to 170 to fight Islam, just because you have so much more riding on that in terms of, like, you say, holy shit, Ilia Topuria might be the greatest fighter who ever stepped in the graces of the octagon. Even at that point, you might even beat John Jones. You go, you're 20-0 at that point. your 21st win undefeated in the UFC and in your MMA career is versus Islam Makhachev for the welterweight strap, and you're a 3-divisional champion. I think that's how Ilya, I feel like that's how Ilya sees his career going. You know, he manifests everything. He's super confident, you know, celebrating the Charles in every fight before it even happens on Friday night. I think if Ilya would like to choose his path, that's the way he sees it going. Maybe he fights Paddy just because he fucking hates the guy. Like Paddy called. I don't know if you saw that. Paddy called everything that was going to happen. He's like, I think Ilya's going to knock him out, jump on the cage, stare at me, and maybe, like, if I'm lucky, I'll get in the octagon. And they had a camera ringside between him and Izzy, and Ilya was just staring directly at Paddy, talking shit to him after that knockout.
That's pretty
I'd actually want to see that fight. A lot of people I might get some hate for this, and I think most people will disagree that Paddy ever deserves that shot at all. But I think that's like such an interesting fight, and I think I just want to see it because I want to see if a Scouser can get knocked out. Because that's kind of, Paddy's whole thing is I can't get knocked out. I would love to see him test that against a guy that, is literally the boogeyman and knocking everybody out.
You know what they
minus
said?
Charles, that didn't happen. That shows AI.
They said Max Holloway didn't get knocked out, and turns out every single person has that off button, and Ilya Topuria is a master of finding it.
Yeah.
And he'll find that probably within 5 minutes.
Yeah, most likely.
And Son, just to rebuttal, I know we were talking about it earlier in our text group chat, and I said that I didn't think Paddy deserved it. I agree with you 100%. I think that's an extremely interesting fight, and I do think stylistically, Paddy's great on the ground. That could be super interesting, and he saw how it played out with Charles. If he spams the takedowns and lasts the later rounds, you never know what happens. Obviously, I'm siding with Ilya. I think the odds would be minus 500, Ilya's favorite, and I'm throwing the house on that. But I think the biggest reason is I feel like there's so many people above Paddy that I would just like to see fight. I think it would be a great fight. I just think it's hard. It's hard for me as a fan who's grown up watching the Dustin Poiriers, the Max Holloways, the Justin Gaethjes, for them not to be like, Gaethje, who cares? Go get a crack at it. He probably gets knocked out. He probably lays his gloves down if he's alive after. But that's how I feel. I just kind of like to see the UFC do right by some of the guys, the vets that have been at the top. But Paddy, that's going to happen at some point. Maybe Paddy needs one more win, which he probably gets. And that's going to sell a lot too. That's
so hard. It's like, what do you do with Arman now? It's like, now you just had that, and if they actually do the Gaethje fight, you know what I mean? It comes down to, it's like, what the hell do you do with Arman Sarukian at this point?
Or
I'm going to be honest. I think Arman's going to get the title shot.
30 seconds.
I don't think Justin's going to get the title shot. I
hope not.
I'm still pretty convinced. Honestly, I don't think either of the three guys that are in contention really necessarily deserve it. But I think if you're picking between one of the three and you're keeping the division active, it's going to be Arman Sarukian that they give the nod to. I feel fairly confident in that. Granted, obviously, I don't fucking work for the UFC, so what do I know? But from what I've heard, I would lean that they're going to give the fight to Arman. And I would like to see Paddy. Paddy has to beat one of those big name guys that are still pretty good in order to get it. He has to beat a Gamrot. He has to beat a Dan Hooker. He has to beat a Gaethje. I know Poirier is retiring, but someone like Poirier, someone like Max Holloway, even a fucking Beneil Dariush. You cannot get this title shot off of Michael Chandler at his current age.
Yeah, I think Sarukian's due for it, dude.
If you want to maximize shareholder value, you give Paddy the title shot.
You gotta think of it like it's still a company. Dana White runs it as a company man. Justin Gaethje came out and said, I didn't want that Max fight, but the UFC pushed for it. He just beat DP. DP lost and then beat BSD and got the title shot against Islam, obviously as like a send-off, hey, one more shot. And then he didn't really need to take the Fiziev fight. He already beat him, and he took it on short notice. So I think Justin Gaethje, out of everyone, I know Arman's probably better. He's probably poses a bigger threat to Ilya. But at the same time, Arman, now that's all coming out, he really wasn't hurt. It was the weight cut, and then he bounced out. He's in the bad graces of the UFC. I don't care what happened. He's not as Justin Gaethje's above him in terms of who the UFC wants. But we'll see.
100%. And by the way, all you fuckers, when Arman Sarukian pulled out, remember I was texting, I go, dude, he's hurt. I guarantee he's hurt, and that's why he couldn't make weight. And we were texting back and forth about that. So I feel pretty good now that Dana White came out and said that. But
no, you feel stupid because he wasn't hurt. He was actually fucking.
Or no, I said no. Sorry, I said he just. I said when I was texting, I said he just missed weight. He wasn't hurt. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was texting that. I'm like, you just fucking missed weight, and they're making up some cover story. regardless.
Let's not
Boys-
let's not be skeptical about that. He's still a killer. We're not in that camp. We don't know what happened, but it seems pretty clear that the UFC is not happy with him. That's all we're going to
100%.
conclude on.
Yeah, I think it's time to wrap it up here. We're getting to Marvel movie length here. We're about to drop a trilogy. Fucking Avengers Endgame 30 is coming out this
100%.
weekend on us. So, Zach, take us away, man.
100%. Thank you all for tuning in. If you don't mind, drop a like, drop a subscription. Means a lot. And enjoy the fights on Saturday. Should be some fun ones. Thank you all.